Galleon's spire hung above the cloud banks, like a ring of glass and steel suspended on nothing but old promises. Morning mist curled along the upper tiers, thin enough to show weld seams in the deck plating, thick enough to blur the faces of passers-by. Trams whispered past on magnetic rails, a hush of steel and current, while adverts scrolled in pale light across tower walls. Stu Rhee stood in front of his shop with a sheet of paper clamped between his fingers, the corners curling in the damp. He pressed it flat against the glass until the adhesive hissed and held. Help wanted. 2 words in block letters, sharp as a command. He hadn't hired anyone in 3 years, hadn't wanted to, but the backlog had grown until even his steady hands couldn't keep up. Dozens of cracked slates and corrupt data cores waited inside, each one a relic that someone cared about enough to bring here instead of throwing away. He stepped back, eyed the alignment of the sign, and stood a little longer than necessary, jaw set in the habit of a man who still measured every line like it mattered dot inside. The archive smelled of dust and warm metal. Amber lamps washed cracked countertops in steady light. Thin preservation tanks lined the wall, their low hum as constant as breath. Stu rolled his sleeves to his elbows, scanning the queue on his console. His shoulders stayed square, his movements precise. He had been a scout once, long ago, and that kind of training never left. Every action efficient, every reaction braced. He preferred to work alone. Silence was easier than people thought by mid-morning. Traffic thickened outside clerks in pressed jackets, students clutching thin gloves and coffee tins, delivery bots trundling across slick plating. They passed his new sign with quick glances and quicker dismissals. Too many other jobs in cleaner rooms with better wages. No one wanted dust and silence. Stu expected nothing else, except one stopped. She stood beneath the sign as though she had been placed there, not walking, not asking, simply waiting. Her skin was muted orange, catching blue reflection from the glass rail. White hair hung heavy with mist, straight down her back like a blade. The wrap clinging to her ribs was ceremonial once, now torn, held by a single frayed ribbon. It split high at her thigh, left her shoulders bare, revealed more absence than possession. She carried nothing, no tools, no pack, not even shoes. Her feet were raw from the grate. She didn't shift when trams hissed past, didn't flinch when 2 students slowed to whisper. People veered around her the way they did when they assumed trouble without touch, without eye contact. Only her gaze moved, tracking every motion in silence, eyes steady amber beneath the deck lights. Not wild, not drug-bright. Just sharp and exhausted. Stu watched from behind the counter. He read people the way he read old drives, checking what would hold, what would break. This one was holding herself together by will alone. He waited until the crowd thinned, until only mist and her remained. Then he stepped outside. "You read the sign," he said. She blinked once, slow. "Yes. You looking for work?" "I'm looking for a place that will keep me," she said. Her voice was low, frayed at the edges like her wrap. "I'll work if that's the price." He studied her eyes a long moment. No flicker, no plea, only endurance. He understood that language. He had lived it after leaving the service, standing in places where belonging was a gamble. Finally, he stepped aside and opened the door. "Good," he said. She didn't hesitate. Bare feet crossed the threshold, into warmth thick with boiled varing root and metal polish. He respected that most flinched the first time they entered his space. She did not. Inside, he pointed to the counter stacked with cores. "Pins right. Cereals up. Wipe with swabs, no solvent. If one fights you, stop. Cut yourself and you're out." "I won't," she said. "Everyone says that." Her fingers were slower than his, but precise. She checked each stamp before she cleaned, never fidgeting, never looking for praise. The only movement came when she retied the ribbon at her chest in a sharp knot. He watched in silence until the hum of the tanks filled the air between them. By noon, her hands had steadied, her shoulders easing just enough to see. He set down a bowl of root stew and a small tin of frozen seed coffee. She hesitated, then ate quickly, without thanks. He said nothing. He remembered what hunger did. When she finished, she looked at the door, expression tight, as though weighing whether to leave before he changed his mind. Stu saw the calculation. He remembered making it in other people's rooms years ago. "Come back tomorrow," he said. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. "I can do that. Same time. Earlier." She nodded. It was settled. She rose in silence and slipped out into the mist, her white hair vanishing against the glass. Stu stood alone in the shop, tanks humming low. Hiring her was a risk. Letting her walk away would have been one too. He marked her name on the logboard and wrote nothing else beside it. For now, that was enough. The mist had not yet lifted from Billy and Spire when Stu reached the stairwell the next morning. The glass walls caught the early lamps, pale light bending through the fog, but he saw her before he opened the door. Ayla was there again, earlier than he had asked, standing beneath the paper sign like it anchored her to the decking. The ink had warped in the damp, but she kept her eyes fixed on it as if daring anyone to tear it down before she earned her place. She wore the same ceremonial wrap, tied tighter now. The ribbon at her ribs was knotted with precision, the cloth pulled clean across her hip. No trembling this time, though her bare feet were raw at the edges, skin abraded from metal grating. Stu took note and said nothing. He unlocked the door and motioned her inside. "You came back," he said. "You told me to," she answered. Her voice was quieter than yesterday, but firmer. "Plenty don't. Plenty aren't me." Something in her tone made him pause. Not defiance against him, but against the world that had tried to erase her. He opened the door wider. The warm air pushed back the chill as she stepped in. The archive smelled the same bearing root steeping on the back plate. Metal polished sharp under the lamps, but the room itself felt different, with her crossing the threshold twice in 2 days. He pulled a dark shirt from a supply crate, worn but clean, and handed it over. "Wear this," he said. She frowned slightly. "Does it matter what they see?" "It matters how much trouble they think you're worth." That landed. She slipped the shirt on without comment. It fell to her mid-thigh, collar sagging off one shoulder, leaving a slice of golden-orange skin visible. She didn't adjust it. He handed her a slate tray and gloves. "Today you handle labeling. Numbers centered. Don't guess. If you aren't sure, ask." "I'll be sure," she said. They worked for hours without words. The hiss of preservation tanks filled the silence. Her rhythm was fast, but not sloppy. Each movement was clean, exact, like she was afraid to waste a second. Stu checked her work more than once and found it correct every time. She didn't seek his approval, but she noted his glances, storing them away like data points. At midday, he set down 2 bowls of Laurenberry porridge. She froze, unsure if she was allowed to sit. "You eat standing up where you're from?" he asked. "You didn't say I could." "I didn't say you couldn't." She lowered herself to the floor, cross-legged, eating without lifting her gaze. Stu stayed on the counter, watching her. The silence was watchful, not uncomfortable. 2 people weighing rules not written down. When she rinsed the bowls without being told, he walked to the logboard. Yesterday, he had written only her name. Today, he added a word beside it. Staff, she noticed. "Why write that?" "Means I'll answer for you if someone complains." "Someone will," she said flatly. "They always do." Her eyes flicked to him, sharp, testing. Then back to the board. "You don't know what I am." "Doesn't matter until it matters," he said. "Will it?" "Maybe. When it does, we'll decide if you stay anyway." That silenced her, but not in surrender. More like she was weighing the words against her own. The afternoon blurred into work. She seated cores into clamps with steady hands, pulsed low current through them to burn off static, logged each without hesitation. By the time lamps dimmed and the deck outside went pale and empty, she had outpaced him on the intake queue. "You've done enough," he said. She kept working 2 minutes more before stopping. Her eyes lingered on the door. "Where should I go tonight?" "You've been sleeping outside." "Yes." "Where?" "Under the vent rail near Decade." "It's warm." "No one looks there." Stu knew the place. Smelled of coolant and mold. "Not anymore," he said. She studied him. "And if I say no?" "Then you walk back to the vent rail and keep watching this door every morning until you can't stand anymore." Her throat worked. Not relief, not yet, but the effort keeping relief from showing. "Where?" she asked quietly. He pointed to the narrow stairs. "Loft above the floor mat. There's a blanket. It locks from the inside. No one goes up but me." She hesitated, then stepped toward the stairs. At the bottom, she turned. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I need you rested," he said. It was true, but not all of it. She climbed, her white hair catching the lamplight as she vanished into the loft. Stu stayed below, locking the door, turning out lamps, listening to the quiet hum of the tanks. His muscles were tense, but not with threat, just old habit. Bracing for something to go wrong. DIDN single quotes T. above, her steps softened into stillness. Then, faintly, he heard her breathing settle into rhythm. He let himself breathe, too. Tomorrow they would see if she stayed. The trams whispered past on their morning rails, a low vibration through the glass wall as Stu unlatched the door. Mist still clung to the decking, soft enough to blur the walkways, but not enough to hide her. She was there again, earlier than he had asked, standing before the paper sign as if guarding it. The ink had warped in the damp, corners curled, but she didn't knock. She just waited, arms loose at her sides, shoulders bare, eyes fixed on the fluttering sheet. He took her in from the stairwell before speaking. Same torn wrap, but it had been tied higher now. Ribbon knotted so tight against her ribs that the fabric lay smooth across her hip. Her feet were rawer than yesterday, skin cracked at the edges. She didn't shift them on the plating. She stood measured, not rigid like she was holding ground, not freezing in place. That difference mattered. "You came back," he said as he opened the door. "You told me to." "Plenty. Don't. Plenty, aren't we?" Her tone was quiet, almost flat, but there was something underneath it, a trace of defiance aimed at the world, not at him. He motioned her inside. The warmth rushed out to meet her. The shop smelled of Varan root again, sharp with metal polish. Amber lamps glowed steady on the counters, illuminating stacks of cracked cores waiting for hands to fix them. Stu reached into a crate and pulled out a dark shirt, worn but clean, and sat on the counter. "Wear this. Customers look less if they can't see skin." Her eyes flicked from him to the shirt, then back. "Does it matter what they look at?" "It matters how much trouble they think you're worth." The line landed clean. She gave a single nod and slid the shirt over her wrap. The hem fell to mid-thigh, collar slipping wide, leaving a strip of golden-orange skin at her shoulder. She adjusted nothing. He handed her gloves and a slate tray. "Today you handle labeling. Numbers centered. Don't guess. If you aren't sure, ask." "I'll be sure," she said. They worked for 2 hours without words, the silence filled only by the faint hiss of preservation tanks and the tap of slate markers. Stu caught himself watching her rhythm. She moved quick, never careless, as if afraid of wasting time she hadn't earned. Every check he made of her work came back precise. At midday, he set down 2 bowls of Laurenberry porridge. She froze, eyes flicking toward the floor like she wasn't sure if she was allowed. "You eat standing up where you're from?" he asked. "You didn't say I could." "I didn't say you couldn't." She lowered herself cross-legged onto the floor, spoon in hand. He stayed on the counter. They ate without speaking, silence watchful but not hostile. When she rinsed both bowls afterward without waiting for instruction, he walked to the logboard. Yesterday he had written only her name. Today he added a single word beside it. "Staff," she noticed. "Why write that?" "Means I'll answer for you if someone complains." "Someone will," she said, evenly. "They always do." Her eyes sharpened on him, then slid back to the board. "You don't know what I am." "Doesn't matter until it matters," he said. "Will it?" "Maybe. When it does, we'll decide if you stay anyway." Her jaw worked once. Not defeat. More like she was storing the words away to weigh later. The rest of the afternoon blurred into routine chores clamped, static purged, serials logged. She memorized each step after a single demonstration. Not copying, but understanding. Stu watched her fingers seat a core into the tank with a care that matched his own. He realized she was mapping not just the work, but him. By evening, the shop glowed dim under the lamps. Outside, the walkways had gone pale and empty. She stacked the last tray, then stood still, gaze lingering toward the door. "If I'm going to keep sleeping here," she said, her voice level, "I need to know the terms." "Terms?" "What you expect from me. What you want." He leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I expect you to work hard, stay honest, and not disappear without telling me. That's all." Her jaw tightened. "And if I don't want to just be staff?" He held her eyes. "Then wait until you know what you do want. Decide from there." She weighed that in silence, amber eyes searching his face for the catch. She didn't find one. "I don't want to be property," she said. "You're not," he answered. "You're here because you chose to be." Something in her shoulders shifted at that small, but real. She stored it away the way she stored procedures, holding it like a map of where she stood. When he locked the door and dimmed the lamps, she followed him up the narrow stairs without being told. She laid her mat out slower than yesterday, less tense, her movements deliberate. He sat on the bed, unlacing his boots. She watched him for a moment longer, then finally spoke, voice quiet as a vow. "I'll stay for now, then rest," he said. She lay down with her back to him, pulling the blanket to her shoulder. Her breathing steadied almost at once, not braced, not shallow steady. He turned off the lamp. City light spilled faint and white across the loft. For the first time in years, Stu let the knot in his chest ease. Tomorrow, he thought, she would stop looking at the door. And maybe he would too. The shop woke with the city. Trams hissed along the rails outside, their low hum rattling the glass wall, while heaters ticked under the decking as the mist burned away. Stu sat on the edge of his bed, boots half-laced, scanning the loft like he always did, checking shadows, air shifts, anything out of place. Nothing stirred except her. Ela was curled on the mat she'd placed near his bed, blanket gathered at her shoulders, white hair loose across her cheek. Her breathing was steady, not braced. That caught him more than anything. He rose, and her eyes opened sharp, alert. They softened when they found him. "You wake fast," he said. "You walk like someone who doesn't trust the floor," she replied, her voice rough from sleep. He didn't deny it. He filled 2 mugs at the small sink with Froen brew, setting one beside her mat. She sat up slow, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, staring at the steam as though it might vanish. "Drink before work," he said. She hesitated. "Is this payment or charity?" "Neither. Fuel. I need you sharp." Her lips tightened, then eased. "Then I'll be sharp." They worked side by side through the morning queue. Stu assigned her the intake ledger, recording IDs, condition notes, routing. She watched once, then matched his rhythm, handwriting precise as if mistakes would cost her place. Between clients, her eyes drifted toward the door, not planning to run, more like expecting someone to come. "Anyone know you're here?" He asked. "No," she said, then faltered. "They didn't want me where I was." Leading was easy. Where was that? She stilled over the ledger. An orbital cultural registry, Tier 11. I was a data interpreter, until they called me inefficient and sent me out with a meal slip and a warning not to return. "That's not inefficient," Stu said. "That's discarded." Her head snapped up, amber eyes sharp. Then she looked down again. "Yes," he said nothing more. Neither did she. By midday, they moved in sync without speaking, he handling physical repairs, she logging and shelving. When a client came, they spoke to him first, but more than once glanced at her. She didn't shrink. Her hip rested against the counter now, not angled toward the door. They ate siren bread with berry paste, sitting at the counter. She spread it in careful strokes, slow and even. "I'm not used to eating where people can see," she murmured. "Get used to it," he said. She gave him a look, measured, almost wary, and took another bite. Later, he caught her standing by the preservation tanks, studying a hairline crack along a wall panel. "This building's old," she said. "So am I," he answered. "Are you staying in it forever?" "That's the plan." Her fingers traced the crack. "Then I'll keep it from falling apart while I'm here." There was no question in her tone. She had decided. He handed her the access tool for the lower seals. She took it without hesitation. When evening came, Stu shut down the register. She stacked the last tray, then stood still, expression firm. "If I'm going to keep sleeping here, I need to know the terms," she said. "Terms?" "What you expect. What you want." Her voice didn't waver. He folded his arms across his chest. "Work hard. Stay honest. Don't disappear without telling me. That's all." Her jaw tightened. "And if I don't want to just be staff?" He held her gaze. "Then wait until you know what you do want. Decide from there." She searched his face, silent, like she was testing for hidden hooks. She didn't find any. "I don't want to be property," she said. "You're not. You're here because you chose to be." Her shoulders eased, barely, but real. She stored the words away like a record, filing them with everything else she was learning. That night, when they climbed the loft stairs, she laid her mat closer to his bed than before. The blanket pulled with steady hands. Stu sat on the edge of the mattress, unlacing his boots. She watched him for a moment longer, then finally said, "I'll stay for now." He nodded once. "Then rest." She lay down with her back to him, breathing even from the start. He turned off the lamp. The glow of the city seeped through the glass, washing faint light across her white hair. For the first time in years, he let his shoulders loosen before sleep took him. The morning broke sharp and clear, heaters burning the mist off the upper decks until Veliant's spire gleamed like a blade above the cloudbanks. Stu was already at the workbench when Ella came down from the loft. She folded her blanket, stacked her mat neatly against the wall, and moved with a calm precision that hadn't been there 3 days ago. She didn't wait for instruction. She poured 2 mugs of brew, set one by his elbow, and opened the ledger. "You're faster today," he said without looking up. "I decided to be." Her tone was simple, not boastful. He marked it in silence and returned to the cracked core under his hands. By mid-morning, a sealed crate arrived, registry markings stamped bold across the lid. The courier who carried it was older, gray hair cropped close, uniform pressed sharper than necessary for a delivery run. His eyes swept the shop, landed on Isla. He slowed. "She's not listed on your license," the courier said flatly. "She works here." Stu replied without lifting his head. The man's mouth tightened. She doesn't exist in the registry. Neither do half the cores you bring me, Stu said. His voice stayed flat, but it carried weight. The courier studied him for a long beat. Then he set the crate on the counter, turned, and left without another word. The door clicked shut. Hila's hands trembled as she shifted the crate into place. Not from fear, Stu could tell, but from anger, tight and hot. He knew where I was from, she said. Maybe. You don't care, she said. If he cared, he'd have called enforcement. He didn't. He just wanted you to flinch. Her jaw tightened. And I didn't. No, Stu said. You didn't. She stared at him, measuring, and went back to work. The shake left her hands, replaced by focus as sharp as a blade dot by midday. She was behind the counter, while Stu repaired a delicate slate. Her hip leaned against the wood, like she'd always belonged there. When two young brokers swaggered in, their voices too loud, their grins too wide, they dropped 3 damaged cores on the counter without care. One of them looked at Hila too long. She knew? He said to Stu, smirking. She's staff, Stu said. The broker snorted. Doesn't look like staff. Stu rose to his full height, shoulders square, eyes steady. He didn't raise his voice. Then adjust your idea of staff, the grin faltered. The man muttered something under his breath and shoved the slate toward Hila. She took it without flinching, logged it with precise handwriting, and slid the receipt back across the counter. The brokers left quickly, the door clanging shut behind them. The silence that followed was thick. Hila stood still, jaw tight, fingers pressing faint crescents into the ledger cover. You didn't have to say that, she said at last. Double quotes. Yes, I did, Stu answered. They already think. That's how they work, he cut in. You don't change it by folding smaller. Her amber eyes lifted to his, narrowed faintly. Then how? You just stand, he said. For a moment she was quiet, weighing his words. Then she nodded, slow, as if filing them away. By afternoon, she moved with new steadiness. She greeted customers herself, her voice clipped but professional, and no one questioned her. When the last order was logged, she leaned against the counter, her rhythm unbroken, a quiet hum under her breath. Stu glanced up from the bench. You handled yourself today. I didn't want them talking to you like that, she said. You don't have to defend me. I know, she said. Her gaze held his. I wanted to. Something shifted in the air between them. Not tension, not distance. Awareness. Neither spoke for the rest of the evening. When closing came, she locked the door without waiting for his nod, dimmed the lamps, and followed him upstairs like it was habit now. The mat lay close beside his bed, her blanket drawn with measured hands. She paused, looking at him in the half-light. Why are you really letting me stay? She asked quietly. Stu leaned against the rail, arms folded. Because you make the work cleaner. That's all. That's enough. She searched his face a long moment. Her voice softened, almost cautious. And if I stop being useful? Then you stay because you want to. She looked away, hiding something that flickered too quick to read. You make it sound simple. It is. She lay down facing him this time. He turned off the lamp. City light spilled faint and white across her skin. Her eyes stayed open longer than usual, watching him through the dim as if trying to solve a puzzle. Eventually, her breathing steadied. He stayed awake longer than he needed to nod as a watcher, just because for the first time in years, the room felt full. The loft was quiet when Stu climbed the stairs that night. Below, the tanks hummed low, steady as always, but up here the silence pressed different. Hila had followed him without being told, the way she had for the past few evenings, but she didn't unroll her mat this time. She stood near the bed, arms at her sides, white hair catching the faint glow from the city beyond the glass wall. He sat on the edge of the mattress, unlacing his boots with deliberate calm. He felt her gaze linger. She didn't move. "If you're tired, lie down," he said. "I'm not tired," she answered. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. He looked up. She hadn't shifted, hadn't glanced away. Her shoulders were squared, her jaw steady, but her eyes, amber and molten in the dim, held him like a question. "Then what are you?" he asked. For the first time since she'd crossed his threshold, she hesitated. A breath, shallow. A word caught, then released. Close. The syllable landed heavy between them. He didn't answer right away. He simply leaned back, leaving space on the bed. She moved slowly, deliberately, slipping onto the mattress. She lay atop the blanket at first, facing him, her hand hovering halfway to his chest. Then she stilled, waiting. "Say it," she whispered. "You belong here," he said, voice steady. Her eyes closed like the words had cut something loose inside her. Her hand settled against his chest, fingers light, almost cautious. He covered them with his own, felt the twitch, then the gradual easing. She stayed like that for a long time, breathing steady, as if testing whether he would shift, push her away, break the fragile balance. He didn't. When her breath deepened, she opened her eyes again, meeting his. "I'm not scared of you," she said. "Good," he replied. "Don't be." The corner of her mouth moved, not a smile exactly, but a release of tension. She shifted closer, closing the gap until her forehead brushed his jaw. Her body was warm against his side, lean muscle and soft skin pressing steady into him. His hand slipped from hers to rest at her hip, not pulling, just holding. She drew in a breath, sharp but controlled, then tilted her face. Her lips touched his, slow and deliberate, her control trembling at the edges. He let her choose the distance. She pressed deeper, lips firm, steadying herself against him. When she paused to breathe, her words spilled quiet against his mouth. "If I stay, it can't be because I'm useful." "It won't be," he said. "You'll say that now." "I don't say things I don't mean." Her hand traced his side carefully, fingers learning the line of him by touch. "Then I don't want to leave." "Then don't," she exhaled, and something shifted her tension, his solitude, both unwinding at once. She settled her head on his chest, hair spilling across him like a pale curtain. He let his hand rest against her back, feeling each breath as it rose and fell. For the first time in years, he realized he wasn't bracing for anything. Not loss, not threat, not silence. Just her, here, staying. They lay like that until sleep took her, and he stayed awake longer than he needed to. Not out of habit this time, but because he wanted to remember the shape of this night. Morning came slow, pale light sliding through the glass wall in sharp white bands. The loft smelled of old paper and the bitter edge of frozen seed brew from the night before. Stu lay still for a long moment, listening. The tanks below hummed faint, the trams whispered by outside, and against his chest Ela's breathing moved even and calm. Her arm was draped across his stomach, her leg hooked loosely over his. The shirt she'd borrowed was twisted half off her waist, her hair tangled across his collarbone. When he shifted, her eyes opened sharp at first, then softening as she realized where she was, how she was lying against him. She didn't pull back. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning," he answered. Her gaze searched his face, as if she expected to find regret there. She didn't. She drew in a breath. "You're not sending me back to the mat?" "No." She rolled onto her back beside him, eyes on the ceiling, hands folded over her stomach. "Then this is real. It's real if we say it is," he said. Her head turned, white hair spilling across the pillow. "Then say it. You're not just staff. You're mine, if you want to be." Her breath caught. I want to be. The words landed clean. No pause, no doubt. They rose together and moved through the morning like a pair who had always shared the space. He lifted crates. She logged intake. When customers came, more than one greeted her directly. She returned the greetings without glancing at Stu for approval. She wore one of his dark shirts tucked at her waist, sleeves rolled, hair braided with a silver thread she'd chosen herself. She belonged behind the counter now. As much as the shelves and tanks did dot by midday, the shop was quiet. Stu pulled the old supply crate from under the bench and lifted out the folded ceremonial wrap. Its white silk was frayed, ribbon torn, faint dust of rail rust still clinging to it. "You want to keep this?" he asked. Ela stared at it, expression unreadable at first. Then her jaw set. "No? You sure?" That was for surviving. "This," she gestured around the shop, at the counters, at him, "this is for living." He held the wrap out. She took it, placed it back in the crate, and pressed her palm flat to the lid, like sealing a decision. "That part's done." "Good," he said, but she didn't step back. Her amber eyes stayed locked on his, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady, unflinching. "You know what that wrap meant?" He shook his head. "It marked me ornamental. Property, dressed up for display in the registry. When they called me inefficient, when they tore my badge, they left me with that." She swallowed hard, but her voice didn't break. Wearing it torn was a declaration. Anyone who saw me knew I'd been thrown away. Stu felt the weight of it settle like a stone in his chest. She had not been merely wandering, not simply hungry. She had stood under his sign marked as disposable, daring the city to erase her or to see her. "You waited all day wearing that," he said, quietly. "I thought if I stood long enough, someone might pretend not to see me. But you stopped. They saw you," he said. They just kept walking. Her breath caught, sharp, then leveled. "You didn't." He stepped closer, reached out, and brushed his hand against hers. "That day, I stopped seeing an empty shop. I saw you." Her throat worked. For once, no words came. She leaned into him, forehead resting against his chest, her hand clutching his shirt. Downstairs, the paper sign still fluttered on the glass door, ink warped from damp. It no longer meant help wanted. It marked the day she had been seen and never had to leave again.